Oh, yeah. Good morning. That's Uncle Lou here. That's right. It is me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. And, man, I can't wait to talk about this game. Texas A&M goes on the road, traveling to the swamp to take on Billy Napier and the Florida Gators. And these are two bad teams, in my opinion, at least in the pecking order within the ACC or SEC. I think Texas A&M is probably the, I don't know, 9th or 10th best team in the SEC. Florida's somewhere worse than that. But if you remember back in the preseason when I did my sort of team-by-team prediction videos where I predict every game on the schedule, I picked Florida to win this game back in the preseason. Will I change my mind now that we have made it to game week? Well, let's start with Florida. Of course, quarterback controversy, whatever you want to call it. Starting quarterback Graham Mertz, of course, goes down. Concussion protocol. Lagway kind of comes in at the end of the Miami game. Game was already over at that point. Couldn't really take anything from that. It was then announced that Mertz was going to be out for an additional week. That was last week. Florida was playing Samford, just a lower classification, not very good school. Lagway gets to start, and he just goes absolutely nuts. Broke all kinds of records, passed for 400-something yards, and the Florida fans are beside himself. This week comes around. Graham Mertz is out of a concussion protocol, and Billy Napier says Graham Mertz is our starter. But DJ Lagway is going to play. And I think that's sort of the storyline heading into this game. How much are we going to see of DJ Lagway? Is it going to be a pre-planned thing? He's going in certain situations. He's going in every third series. Are they going to rotate series? Like that's kind of the story heading into this. There are other aspects to the game, but that's sort of the dominating storyline here is how they're going to use Lagway. And obviously it's great to have a plan, and you need to have a plan, and I'm sure they're going to have a plan in terms of how to use him, when to use him, how often to use him. But I think more importantly than that, Billy Napier's got to be flexible here. In the first quarter and a half of this game, maybe the first 3 to 4 possessions of the game, you've seen a little bit of Graham Mertz, a little bit of DJ Lagway at that point. If it becomes pretty clear that one quarterback or the other is having more success, or the offense is responding to him, or Texas A&M is having a harder time defending one or the other, or whatever the case is, Billy Napier is going to have the ability and the willingness, I think, to kind of throw that pregame plan out the window and sort of the ride the hot hand thing. If they're going to have a chance of pulling off the upset here, and it would be an upset. Florida is about a 4 or a 4.5 point underdog. Game has come down a little bit. It was 4.5 earlier in the week. It's 4 now. So Texas A&M a 4-point road favorite on the road at Florida. They're going to have a good game by the quarterback no matter who it is. Obviously, in this game against Texas A&M, who's got a pretty good defense. Texas A&M, sort of a similar story in terms of the type of a team they are. Not good offensively. You watched the Notre Dame game a couple of weeks ago. It's really nothing they did well in that game. They struggled to run the ball. Connor Wegman looked awful. But they played pretty good defense against Notre Dame. And Florida, I think, is better defensively than they are offensively as well. So this will be kind of a low scoring, maybe, ugly, sloppy type of game that sort of gets dominated by the defenses. And if you look at the over-under in this game, which is the expected total number of points scored, it's extremely low for what we've come to expect to see in college football games. It's around 47. Usually the over-under in these types of games is, mid-50s up to the 60s, lower 60s, even into the mid or upper 60s sometimes. So the over-under sitting at 47 here tells you that at least Vegas is what they're expecting is not a whole lot of offense, kind of a low-scoring game, maybe both teams into the 20s, 20 to 24, 24 to 28, 27 to 23, something in that range there. And I think that's probably pretty close to right. I'm not impressed with either one of these offenses either. You look at Texas A&M, Connor Wegman just really hasn't looked good. And honestly, I didn't think he looked that good when he played before. And I know he got injured, and so there was always this hope that he was going to come back from injury and be kind of the quarterback that maybe some people thought he could be. But you watch the Notre Dame game, it wasn't great. It's just nothing comes easy to him. He struggled really to complete anything against Notre Dame in a loss in week 1 at home. And these two teams kind of have that in common when you look at sort of how their season has gone so far, right? Both played big non-con opponents at home in week 1 and lost. Both played sort of lower classification elementary schools in week 2 and 1. In the case of Florida, they beat Samford. Lagway set all kinds of records against a nothing team. Texas A&M handled business against McNeese State. And Wegman did have a couple of touchdown passes in the first half of that game. The running back scored a couple of touchdowns there. And obviously, both offenses looked a lot better in week 2 against elementary schools than they did in week 1 against legitimate teams. But I think we're going to see, in terms of what these offenses are going to do in this game, I think both of these offenses are going to look much more like they looked in week 1 than what they looked like in week 2. I think points are going to be at a premium here. I did pick Texas A&M to pull the upset in the preseason when I made my game-by-game prediction videos. You look at Billy Napier and his time at Florida, which obviously has not been successful at all. 2 straight losing seasons. This is his 3rd year, so he's had a losing season every single year he's been there. He inherited a team with a losing record. So overall, this is, Florida has 3 losing seasons in a row. It looks probably like they're headed towards a 4th losing season in a row, and I'm not high on Florida. I wasn't in the preseason. I wasn't in the offseason. I'm not high on them now. But I did pick Florida to win this game back in the preseason because Billy Napier pulls off one of these types of wins every September. He's not a great coach, but he seems to pull a rabbit out of his hat once every November. You go back 2 years ago, they had that big win at home against Cam Rising in Utah. You go back last year, Tennessee was coming off one of their best years ever. All kinds of hype in the offseason leading into the year for Tennessee. They go into the swamp and lose as a big favorite. Florida beats them outright in September. So 2 years in a row, he sort of pulled off one of these games in September. Now, they have 2 opportunities really to do that this year. Florida a couple of weeks ago and Texas A&M this coming week. I couldn't see them beating Miami in the preseason, so I couldn't make myself predict the upset there, but I did predict Florida to win this game in the preseason, and I haven't seen anything out of Texas A&M yet so far this year, or Florida for that matter, that would make me change my mind. Florida is, so far anyway, about what I thought they would be, and same thing for Texas A&M. I predicted them to lose to Notre Dame and then beat McNeese State. That's what they've done. I haven't been overly impressed with Texas A&M's offense. They're kind of what I thought they would be. I like Mike Elko, and I think he will have some amount of success at Texas A&M relative to what Jimbo Fisher was able to do, but I never thought for a second he was going to come in there day one, flip a switch, and all of a sudden Texas A&M was going to become the team that we've kind of been told they were going to be year after year after year for the last 50, 60, 70 years, whatever it's been. I was under no illusions that was going to happen, though some people were. Texas A&M was ranked in the preseason. It made no sense at all. It made no sense at all. So they lose to Notre Dame to beat McNeese State. Florida lose to Miami, beat Sanford, and now this Saturday, 3:30 in the Swamp. Florida's about a 4.5 point underdog. I actually bet the game earlier in the week, so I've got Florida plus 4.5. The line has come down to 4, so that means money is going on Florida. Well, I'm on the right side of the bet anyway, which is good news. I think this is going to be a good game, and if you consider a good game to be like a one possession type game in the second half. I don't think Texas A&M is going to come in here and blow the doors off Florida. I don't think Florida's fixing to put up 50 points on Texas A&M and like, oh my God, Florida's back type of thing. I think it's going to be an ugly, low scoring game. I think both offenses are going to struggle for the entirety of the game. 1 or 2 big plays here or there. Turnovers would be huge in this game. The crowd, a lot was made about the crowd at Miami in that week 1, or the crowd in Florida in the Swamp. During that week 1 game against Miami. In fact, a lot was made of it by the Miami players and how they just weren't impressed and it didn't live up to what they were told it would be. And if Florida falls behind early in this game, the Florida crowd is kind of teetering right now. Most of them have already given up on the idea that Billy Napier is going to be successful long-term at Florida. But we all know how it is to be a fan. No matter how down you are on a coach or a team, you almost always go into a game, no matter who you're playing, going, we can probably win this. So, if you go in with that attitude and then you look up at the end of the first quarter and it's 13-3, Texas A&M on top, or 14-3 or 10-0 or something like that, it's going to take the crowd out. In other words, the crowd is almost looking for a reason at this point to just check out. So I think it's important here that Florida does not fall behind by multiple scores early in this game. So, Texas A&M gets the ball first, they go down and kick a field goal, they're up 3-0, crowd's still in it, right? Even if Texas A&M gets the ball, go down, score a touchdown, 7-0, crowd's still in it. You haven't seen your offense yet. Mertz comes out, maybe Florida doesn't score, still 7-0. Florida's defense forces a punt, Florida gets the ball back, maybe Lagway comes out, that reinvigorates the crowd. I think that is worth something early in the game. But in order to keep the crowd in this game, which is what I think has to happen in order for Florida to have a chance to win, they've got to keep the score close. They just do not have the offense. Mertz, Lagway, it really doesn't matter. They don't have the offense to kind of come back from 2 or 3 scores down. especially without the help of the crowd. And if they go down 2 or 3 scores, I do think the crowd will check out. They'll turn on Florida. I think you'll hear the boo birds and things like that. I obviously don't think that's going to happen. I've got Florida winning the game. I predicted that in the offseason. I'm sticking with it this week. I've seen nothing from Texas A&M or Florida, for that matter, that would make me change my mind. I expected Florida to lose to Miami. I expected Texas A&M to lose to Notre Dame. I expected Florida to be bad. I expected Texas A&M to be bad offensively, particularly Connor Wegman. And look, do I trust Connor Wegman to go on the road in a place like the Swamp and perform at some super high level? No. No, I don't. I think Florida's been a home underdog something like 9 times in the last 7 or 8 years, and they're like 6-3. So they typically perform pretty well against the spread at home as an underdog. I think they do it again on Saturday. There is some energy down there coming off this past weekend's game, even though it was kind of a nothing opponent in Samford, and you can't, at least I don't think you really can extrapolate anything from that win over Samford and kind of apply it to the rest of the season. It is possible that a big win like that, and by big I mean point-wise, not big as in the opponent. I do think it's possible that because of the way they won and because of how Lagway played, that is enough to sort of re-energize or invigorate not just the crowd but the team here for this week to sort of, hey, let's kind of try to keep this thing going. And I think Florida actually pulls the upset and gets the win here at home over Texas A&M. I think it's going to be a great game. This one comes on at 3:30. I think it's the is it an ESPN game? And it doesn't matter. You'll find it if you want to watch it. But it comes on at 3:30. It's going to be a great game. I'm excited to watch it. Are they great teams? No, these are not great teams. But I think it'll be a great game. I think this is could go either way type of thing. I think it'll definitely be a one-possession game, second half into the fourth quarter, where sort of anybody could win it type of deal. You're waiting on one team either to make a play or the other team maybe to make a mistake and the other team capitalize on it. I think it's going to be one of those things. Special teams play, a turnover here or there could turn this game. Sort of which quarterback plays the least bad, especially between Mertz and Wegman, which obviously just are not great QBs. Whichever one, who plays the least bad between those two. And then what can Lagway? Lagway's the wild card. Let's just be real. Let's talk about Lagway for a second, then we'll wrap it up. Lagway's the wild, a 5-star kid. Everybody wanted him, all the talent, potential, all of that stuff. There's a reason why very few quarterbacks start as a freshman, and that is it's overwhelming. It is not the same as high school. Very few quarterbacks show up in college, 5-star or not, ready to play against that level of competition. Trevor Lawrence was able to do it. Look at all the hype and sort of buzz around Nico, right? He didn't start last year, even when Joe Milton was struggling at times and the fans were fed up with the quarterback play there. They left Nico on the bench. You got to assume Josh Heupel knows what he's doing when it comes to the quarterbacks, right? Don't you think if he thought Nico was ready to play last year, he would have put him in? Don't you think he would have? Now, that doesn't mean that Lagway can't have success as a true freshman. He could. But it's just hard to find a lot of success stories for true freshman quarterbacks, especially true freshman quarterbacks on bad teams. And that's sort of the only pushback I've had against Florida fans in the last few days when it comes to this Lagway excitement and the Lagway conversation is, let's assume for a second that Lagway ends up being or is already as good as advertised. There's just not enough around him for it to make that big of a difference. There's just not. Florida is battle on the line of scrimmage. They got torched defensively against Miami. They looked lost, confused. Miami did whatever they wanted against them. Now, Texas A&M doesn't have that type of talent. Right now, I'm talking more long-term over the course of the season. Lagway versus Mertz and sort of the decision-making that goes on there. And the last thing you want to do is put a kid in like Lagway and run the risk of sort of ruining him psychologically early on in his career because he's not fully ready to be the guy. And on top of that, he's on a bad team, suffering blowout after blowout, or, running for his life, getting sacked a bunch of times, whatever the case. Think about Anthony Richardson, right? Anthony Richardson, ton of talent, athletic ability, huge ceiling, drafted top 5 overall in the NFL draft. Never really did anything at Florida. And I think that's a direct fault of Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen sort of gave in to the fans a few years ago. They were demanding Anthony Richardson. Florida was having a bad year. We want Anthony Richardson. And Dan Mullen says, fine, you think you know better than I do? I'll give Anthony Richardson his first start against Georgia. not just any Georgia, but 2021 Georgia, one of the best defenses of my lifetime of any school. And it just ruined Anthony Richardson for the next couple of years. Now, the NFL took a chance on him because of talent and potential, but he just never able to get going after that at Florida. And that's the last thing you would want to do to Lagway. One other, this is the last issue, I promise, with Lagway. The conversation surrounding Billy Napier and whether or not he's getting fired, and if he is, when, and what would that mean for the recruiting class and for the current players and the transfer portal, all of that kind of stuff, right? You run the risk here if you play Lagway and he plays well. You got to think, every pass Lagway completes, every touchdown he throws, every run he makes, his NIL value next year in the portal, were he to enter the portal, is higher, 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 higher. Not that that should be or will be a contributing factor to whether or not Billy Napier chooses to play him or how much he plays him, but it's just kind of an interesting thing to keep in the back of your mind. It's sort of a new world that we're in with NIL now, so you're kind of having to think about things or that maybe you never had to think of before. And this came up last night, I think, on the call-in show, but it's almost like an open audition for DJ Lagway. I know Florida fans don't want to lose him, and I'm not saying he would 100% enter the portal if Napier gets fired. I'm not suggesting that. Is it a possibility? Of course. It's a possibility any player on any team could enter the portal at any time. I mean, just look around college football. It's crazy. But in the case of this kid here, a five-star QB that everybody wanted lands at Florida, he's basically having an open audition now. Teams are not going to have to go back and look at his high school tape. He's going to have a ton of college tape on film against legitimate competition playing this SEC schedule that Florida has coming up. And so if he performs any type of above average type of way, his portal value is going to skyrocket, and maybe the chances of him entering the portal skyrocket as well. Just something to think about here. I had to pee on the Florida man's parade a little bit here. I am picking you to win after all. I can't come on here and be all positive when it comes to the Gators, though. It's against the law here in Georgia where I live. So I thought I'd end the video with a little bit of cold, hard reality there. Open audition for DJ Lagway the rest of the season. Every pass he completes makes it more likely he enters the portal at the end of the season. Anyway, I've got two bets on this game. I took Florida plus the 4.5. I also put a little bit on the money line for Florida to win outright. If you like to bet over-unders, even though the under is low, around 47, I like the under. I think this could be very similar to the Texas A&M Notre Dame game. 20-17, 24-10, 24-17, 27-20. 26-20 in that range there. I like the under. I like the under 47. Anyway, appreciate you watching. Let me know down below what you think. Am I wrong? Does Florida just have no chance here? I think Florida pulls off the upset and wins the game. Appreciate you watching. Have a good morning.